Welcome to How to Create API SDK Reference Documentation in a Click with DocToHelp. My name is Nikki Blyle, and I'm a Senior Information Developer here at Component One. And we'll keep this webinar short and informative. I think you'll find out a lot you didn't know about creating API SDK doc. Okay, first of all, what we're going to discuss. Who can create reference documentation with DocToHelp? What you can create, the difference between API and SDK documentation, the 5 ways DocToHelp makes reference doc simple, and then we will do a demo which will show you how all of it works. Okay, first of all, who can create reference documentation with DocToHelp? Technical communicators can do it, software developers can do it, basically anyone who needs to can use DocToHelp to create API SDK reference documentation, and it's very, very simple to do. What can you create? You can create MSDN-Style class library documentation for your .NET applications. Plus, you could add additional content if needed. So if you would like to add licensing information, if you would like to add introductory information, frequently asked questions, anything you could think of, you could add that additional comment. You could add that additional content with DocToHelp, and it's very, very simple to do. Okay, the difference between API and SDK documentation. The reason I go over this quickly is because basically API documentation is your set of routines, protocols, and tools for building software applications. But an SDK is a whole package, so it can include one or more APIs. So with DocToHelp, if you want, you could document simply your API, or you could use our Sandcastle plugin and include more than one set of reference documentation. So you could document your entire software development kit in one project, have WinHelp file, and you're done with DocToHelp. Okay, 5 ways DocToHelp makes reference docs simple. Number 1, DocToHelp is the first help authoring tool to integrate with and provide an interface to Microsoft Sandcastle. Now, if you're not familiar with Sandcastle, it's a documentation generator from Microsoft that automatically produces MSDN-Style reference doc using the reflection information of your .NET assemblies and XML comments. But there is no interface on it. So DocToHelp gives you an interface to Sandcastle and allows you to use it without having to do a lot of programming, or do any programming, actually. Number 2, with DocToHelp, you create your MSDN-Style reference documentation quickly. You only need 2 project files. You need the assembly DLL, you need the XML comments file. Number 3, if you wish, as I mentioned earlier, you can create your own content. You could write an introduction, tutorials, whatever you want, and you could actually link to the reference documentation with the click of a button. DocToHelp includes a Sandcastle toolbar in the editor, so that if you want to link to a class or a property or an enumeration, all you do is select that text and click on the button and you create the link. This is very, very, very useful because you can make interaction with your documentation for your users with very little extra work on your part. One thing I do want to mention about documenting APIs and SDKs, of course, these can be internal or external. So if you're documenting an internal API or SDK for use within your company, you could include a lot of extra information such as who is on what team, who writes what code, that sort of thing. And this can only be for internal use, or you can create this documentation and it is ready to go. It is perfectly appropriate and fully functional to send to outside customers. That's fine also. You could do it either way. And with DocToHelp, there's actually something we have called conditions, which you could use, and you could actually, from one project, one DocToHelp project, create a version of your help for internal users and also for external customers. So you could keep it simple, have one project and create documentation for both. Okay, number 4, you can create 6 different types of outputs, so lots of flexibility here. You can create the brand new Microsoft Help Viewer output that integrates with Visual Studio 2010. So if you are developing items that work within Visual Studio 2010, you could use the new Help Viewer output. It was released in April, so it's very, very new. Help 2.0, you could also create that output. That only integrates with Visual Studio 2007 and 2005. You could create HTML help, which are commonly known as CHUM files, compiled HTML. NetHelp, which is DocToHelp's browser-based help, so you could have your help open in a browser. WinHelp and JavaHelp. So you have a lot of options for output. And you can create a manual output. The issue is that Sandcastle does not support outputting to that format. So that's a limitation of Sandcastle. So if you can create a manual output from DocToHelp, that's the 7th kind of output. But if you do it with a project that includes a reference section, the reference section won't be included in the manual, but if you created an introduction, tutorials, you have your end user license agreement, all those things will appear in your manual. Okay, and finally, number 5, DocToHelp automatically creates the table of contents, the index, and the search for you. So all that is done out of the box, so you don't need to do any extra work. Now, you can customize the table of contents all that you want, and you could customize the index all that you want. You could add more items to the index, but you don't have to. You will get something automatically out of the box based on the structure of your document, and I'll talk about that more in a second. So what we're going to do now, I'm going to check for questions very quickly. Okay, it looks like we're okay. I don't see any hands up. So let's see. I am checking very quickly. Okay, we look good. And I'm going to do a demonstration of how you create API SDK documentation with DocToHelp. So I'm going to hop on over to DocToHelp, and this is the DocToHelp interface. Right now I have no project open. It's empty. There's no project. We're going to create one using our Getting Started wizard. So if I click on this Getting Started button in the upper right-hand corner, we're going to open the Getting Started wizard. I want to start a new project. I'll click Next. New project name, I'm going to name it API SDK, just to give it a name. And as you can see, DocToHelp automatically placed it in the My DocToHelp Projects folder and named the folder for the project by the project name. I, of course, can change that if I would like, but I'll stick with the default. Oh, I already have that on my machine. So I will just give it a different name. Okay, do I want to import settings from an existing project? Now this is interesting. If you already have existing DocToHelp projects and you like the way the styles are set up, the output settings, variables, things like that, you could actually pull that information in very quickly using the wizard. But we won't do that today, but just want to let you know that once you have one project set up the way you like it in DocToHelp, you could import those settings in a click. Okay, default language, there are a lot of them. We're going to stick with US English. Okay, default source style sheets. DocToHelp uses style sheets basically depending on what your source documents are. It will either use a Word template if your source documents are Word, or it will use a CSS if you are authoring in HTML or in our built-in XHTML editor, which we have. So if you'd like to work in XHTML, you could do that. So these are the defaults. We'll just stick with those, but there are several choices, and you could edit your own, but the defaults will work fine. We want to pick NetHelp, which is our browser-based output, as our default target, but I will show you once we get our project together, you can choose any of these targets and build them at any time. One caveat on building Microsoft Help 2.0 and building Microsoft Help Viewer Help is that you do need to have Visual Studio installed on the machine. And that's just a requirement of those formats, of those outputs, sorry. JavaHelp, you also have to have some Java bits installed, but all of that is in the documentation for DocToHelp. Basically, the point being is that those things integrate with Help 2.0 integrates with Visual Studio 2005 and 2007. Help Viewer 1.0 integrates with Visual Studio 2010. So it would make sense that those things need to be installed, because when you want to output, the only way you could view them is if you have those applications on your machine. And JavaHelp, of course, you need the appropriate Java software running for the same reason. Okay, we want to, with DocToHelp, you can choose to have an empty XHTML document included in your project, an empty Word document, an empty HTML document. You could choose to import existing files into your project right now, so if you have some existing information, you could pull it in with the wizard. We're going to choose empty project with no initial document. And you could add documents at any time with DocToHelp. There's a button for that, which I will show you. So right now our project is being created. Okay, our project is created, and you can see in the Documents pane, if you look at my cursor, there's nothing there because we said empty project, no documents. If we wanted to add a document that we already had, we would simply click the Add Document button, and we could import documents that way. Just wanted to show you that very quickly. If we want to create a new document, we just click the New Document button, and we could choose the type of document we would like to create and create it right there. So it's very, very easy to add existing or new documents to your project. But the first thing I want to do is add our Sandcastle plugin in, because the thing we're talking about today is API and SDK doc. So I'm going to click our Project tab, click the Plugins button, and we want to create a new plugin document. I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it Reference. Not very creative, but it'll do. Okay, and it says the plugin type Sandcastle. That is correct. We'll say OK. So now, as you can see, I have a little plugin. It has a little icon that's like an electrical plug there. So I've got that much done. The plugin's created. And what I need to do is add the assembly file and the XML comments file. So I'm going to double click on this, and this opens DocToHelp's interface to Sandcastle. So here we go. We're there. If I click on the assemblies node, as we call it, each of the items on the left-hand pane opens up a different screen. So I'm going to find our assembly file, and where I keep that, I have that on my machine. Let me maneuver to it very quickly. And here we are. Here's our assembly DLL file. I also need to add my XML comments file, and I have that in the same folder. So there they are. They've both been added. It was that quick. If you take a look at the visibility filter, you can see that you can tell Sandcastle what you want to include in your output. You want to, by default, it's public, protected, and attributes for types and members for types. You could choose to include internal types. You can choose to add private types if you want. Same thing for members. So you have options there about what you include and exclude. And also on the output node, you could choose for language syntax. By default, as you could see, C# and Visual Basic are included. You could include others. Your presentation style for topics. There are 3 that are included. This is all in the documentation. There are screen captures of what these look like. But you could choose Prototype, Visual Studio 2005, or HANA. I'm going to choose HANA. And so basically that's all we have to do, and we're going to be able to create reference documentation. So I'm going to click our build button. Now, one thing I did want to show you, when we were using the wizard, we chose NetHelp by default as what we wanted to build, and so this project, the first thing it wants to do is build NetHelp, but I could choose any one of these outputs and build them right now just by using this drop down. So I'm going to choose NetHelp because that's what we want to build, but that's how simple it is. So we're building. And one thing I did want to mention, you could do, there's a dialog box called the Help Targets dialog box that you could use to configure your project. You could say, you could choose not to show in that menu I just showed you, that drop down, not to show JavaHelp, not to show manual, not to show WinHelp, that sort of thing. You could customize the way it looks. You could also name the target. So this product that I pulled in the files for is called C1 Barcode. I could have it say C1 Barcode NetHelp or C1 Barcode Help, that sort of thing. So it's fully customizable. And you can also, as I mentioned earlier, if you want to create an internal and an external version of this project, you could create a project called External NetHelp, say, and one called Internal NetHelp. So you could have 2 NetHelp outputs, but it's just the way you configure the 2 of them that will make them different. But my point being is that you can have 5 different NetHelp outputs. You're not restricted to one. So you have a lot of flexibility with DocToHelp and what you want to build. So this is building away. This is a rather small assembly file which we use for purposes of demonstration because some files it would take a really, really long time for them to build and you would get bored watching it. So once this finishes building, we're going to take a look at the output, and I'm going to show you some cool things about it. And then we're going to add just one file that is some what we call narrative information. It's not reference documentation. It's information we've written ourselves. It's not taken from the assembly DLL or from the XML comments file. It's stuff we've authored ourselves. So this should be done in a second. While this is building, I'm going to check and see if anybody's hands are up. No, it looks like everybody's okay. If you have any questions, please raise your hand or put them in the chat at any time, and I will answer your question. We look okay for now. Okay, this should be built in a second. Now, one thing I did want to mention is that there was a newer version of Sandcastle that came out earlier this year. So DocToHelp supports version 2.4.10520.1, but the link to the download for that is in the DocToHelp documentation, so not a problem finding it. Now, do we want to view the target that has been built? Yes. And that should display in a second because we chose browser-based help. Okay, so here's what we have. This is the HANA style, and it has these tabs. And if I open the table of contents, which was generated automatically based on the structure of the reference documentation, you can see that all of the methods, the properties, everything are included. I do want to show you one of them in particular because it's a good example, the code type property. As you can see, we have syntax. We have the C# syntax because, as you may recall, in the Sandcastle interface, we we had picked that we wanted to show the C# and the Visual Basic syntax. There it is. This link will take you to the namespace information. You could go back to where we were. Okay, the remarks were taken from the XML comments file, so there are the remarks. Here are the examples. There's a C# example, so it's included. If there was a Visual Basic example, there would be a tab for it. There's a copy code button, so you could just click that and copy the code. And then there's a See Also section that is automatically generated, so we can see the other item, the other items that there's links to those items created automatically. So if you look at this members information, you'll see that there are descriptions here. So that is taken from the XML comments file, those descriptions. So if no description is written, there will simply not be one there. But the important thing is that these members and the way they all relate to each other and the way the linking works will all be there for you. So even if the developers don't enter a lot of code comments as you would want them to, you will still have useful information in the reference documentation that is generated by DocToHelp. And you can see we have a contents pane displayed automatically. Here's the index. The index right now only includes the methods and properties and namespaces. This was automatically pulled. There is a search pane. Developers can specify their favorites right here, so they could do that. There are back and forward buttons. Now all of this is customizable. There's a print button. There's an email button. So you could email this to someone. You can email this topic to someone else. So, and you could customize this logo that's up in the corner. Right now, by default, it is a DocToHelp logo, and it says powered by DocToHelp, but you can change that. So it's very, very customizable. You could, and there are several. These are called themes, like the way the gray colors and the way the colors that the table of contents changes to when you click on them, the buttons that are on the top, the logo, all that stuff is part of the theme. DocToHelp comes with several themes for each output. You could pick the one that's closest to what you want and then create a custom theme for yourself if you want to. The important thing is you don't have to. This is fine out of the box. But if you want to do something special, you can do it. So that's the important thing. So now we're going to just very, very quickly, as part of our demo, add an existing document to this and add a little bit of a, as we called it, narrative. So I'm going to click the Add Existing Documents button. Now in DocToHelp, if you want, you can import documents that are stored in a SharePoint library. This is a new feature. We're not going to import from one today, but if we wanted to, we would just click that button and go in that direction. But we're going to say local. It's a Word doc, but I could have an HTML or XHTML doc and pull that in. I want to keep it in Word. DocToHelp could automatically at this point convert it to XHTML if I wanted to. And I'm going to say Add File, and I'm going to jump right in and go into my demo files, and the document I have is called My Document, and it's an existing Word document. What DocToHelp will do is automatically copy the file to the Documents folder, which is the default folder in your project where documents should exist. So your original document can stay exactly where it is, untouched, and a copy of it's imported into the project. Click Close. Okay, now since I sort of already had my cursor on the reference documentation, it put it at the top. I mean, it put this at the bottom and put our document there, so all I do is click the Move Up button to get it the way I want. And we're going to do another build, and that's going to incorporate our Word document. So while that's building, actually, I'm going to cancel the build, and I want to show you the Word document very quickly. So you can see I canceled the build pretty easily there by clicking the Cancel Build button. Okay, I just want to show you what this file looks like. We have a welcome section. This is a heading 1. What DocToHelp does is, by default, it uses heading 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 to structure your project properly. You can change that. It's fully customizable. But most people use the default heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, for example, in Word. So if your documents are, if you already have documents that are written that way, you can just pull them in and use them. You could pull in and use ones that aren't using heading 1, 2, and 3, because it's very easy. There's one dialog box you use to create mappings, and you can still use those documents without changing them. So very, very handy. So we've got some licensing information here. And then we have a topic called About This Control, about the C1 barcode control. And it talks about, it wants to link to the C1 barcode class and also to the code type property. So what I do is I open the Sandcastle ribbon within Word. If you are using Word 2003, this would be a toolbar. And all I do is, I know C1 barcode is a class. I'm going to click the class button, and I've automatically created a link to C1 barcode class. I know code type is a property, so I'm going to select that, and I'm going to click the property button. So when you use this, you do need to have some knowledge of, when you're writing, what's a class and what's the property and what's a constructor and what's a method and that sort of thing, so that you click the correct button. But the point is, outside of knowing that, you don't need to know anything else. You just use the buttons and you automatically create a link. So we're going to save this document and close it, and now I'm going to do a build. And those links will be created automatically for us, plus that document and all the information in it will be added to our project. Now, one thing that's really cool too is, if you like to work in HTML, you can work in any HTML editor, but DocToHelp has an interface to Microsoft Front Page and to Dreamweaver. So if you already use either of those HTML editors, when you install DocToHelp, a DocToHelp toolbar will be added to those particular applications, but you could use any HTML editor. And also, DocToHelp has a built-in XHTML editor, so you could also author within our XHTML editor and not use any outside editor at all. Not use Word, don't use Front Page, don't use Dreamweaver. Use DocToHelp's built-in editor. You know, one product, that's it. And it's a very multifunctional XHTML editor. It has its own set of ribbons. You could do, you know, insert symbols. You could insert hyperlinks. You can insert images. You could do anything you want. So if you would like to use one product, you know, it's your one-stop shop. One thing that's nice about the fact that Word documents can be imported is, a lot of people have Word documents. You know, they have the documentation all done in Word. So the fact that DocToHelp can import those documents and use them within a help project with no additional work is very, very useful. So it's very powerful. So that's, we give people a lot of flexibility. You know, use the XHTML editor if you want, but if you have existing Word documents, you want to pull them in. And of course, you saw the one other interim thing that we had there, function. You can, as you're importing these existing Word documents, you can convert them to XHTML and then author within our XHTML editor. So if you have Word documents and you want to get away from keeping them in Word, you know, it's one click. As you're importing them, convert them to XHTML right then. Very, very simple. So this is almost done. I'm going to check and see if any hands are up. No, we're good. Okay, would you like to view the help target that's been built? Yes. And sorry, this I have the IE security setting running, so that happens. But of course, when you don't have that turned on, you won't get the famous yellow bar. So okay, based on the structure of our documents in the documents pane, our welcome topic is there now, or about the C1 barcode control topic is there, and right under it is our reference doc section, so it's all in the order we specified. In the welcome topic, there were a few items under that. about component 1, copyright notice, licensing, it's all there. Okay, so in this particular topic, we created a link with just one click to the C1 barcode class and the code type property. If I click, there we go automatically to the barcode class. And if I click code type property, go automatically to the code type property. So you can see how powerful this is. You could write examples and link your users directly to the property and class information you're talking about. So, very, very useful. And of course, you don't need to create any narrative, as you saw at the beginning. You could just create your reference section and call it a day and say, I am done, here's the reference section, go to town, that sort of thing. So you have a lot of flexibility, but if you want to write a welcome topic or some other information, other useful information for your users, you can do that. So that, in a nutshell, is the demonstration. And here's my contact information. My email address is nikkib@doctohelp.com. You could follow DocToHelp on Twitter, and our handle is DocToHelp with no dashes, because you can't do that in Twitter. On Facebook, we're on Facebook, and our ID is DocToHelp, of course, and we have a website, DocToHelp.com. So if you want to download DocToHelp, there's a free 30-day download that's fully functional. You can try it out for yourself. Just download DocToHelp and try it out, see what you think. There is a sample. When you use the Getting Started wizard I showed you, there's an option. Instead of creating a new project, you could say open a sample project. And there's a sample project called Sandcastle. And you could actually open that up, and you can double-click on that reference plugin that I showed you, and you could take a look at that interface with Sandcastle and see how powerful it is. And you could play around with that project and then create your own. So that's all there for you. So very, very handy. And with that, I see that we don't have any additional questions, and I will let you go. Please feel free to email me at any time. I appreciate your attention. Thanks so much for coming, and have a very nice day.